Good. Now that we're recording these, now that we're off the old fashioned telephone calls, we're recording them and we're doing notes that come out on Friday, and we're posting the notes. Our webmaster is doing pretty good. They're usually up on the website. I send them out to everybody on the PLC list, but they're also up on the website usually by midweek of the following week. If you're not getting notes and invites, the most direct way is just send me your contact information. msenu, my name's up there, msenu@gmail.com. And we'll make sure you're on the list. Or if you want to be removed from the list and you're tired of getting all these notices, you could do the same thing. So, but those have a lot of handy things and more things than we talk about because we just don't have enough time. So let's run through the roster here. And actually, when you introduce yourself, if there's something that you've got a question on, you might forget during the session. If there's something that you're concerned with, you could mention it, like I'm concerned about this particular issue with our grant or grant writing or whatever. You could just mention it if you want to. Steve, why don't you get started?
Okay. It's good to see everybody and hear everybody. Do you want me? Are we going to introduce ourselves first?
We are. We'll do that quickly.
Okay. All right. Again, well, Steve Fenton here with HMTRI with Mike and Nolan. Good to see everyone.
Mike Senu, facilitator with HMTRI, and Abby.
Hi, everyone. My name's Abby. I'm from the Employment Institute at Auberly in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. And I was writing our grant right before this. So I figured what better way to take a break than to hop on and hear any last minute tips and tricks. One question I did have before I forget was, did anyone catch the expected announcement date in the RFP? I swear I've read it like 50 times.
Yes, June 1st.
Okay.
It was actually on a PLC. It happened as we were on the PLC. Alma came on and said, "Hey, they just announced it," and that was on June 1st, and it's due August 2nd.
Oh no, I mean like for when the EPA will make decisions.
Oh, okay, that's a different question. That is more unpredictable. I would say the same time as last year. We're shooting. I think we're going to do it in February or March.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do write it in the RFP, but this year they didn't.
No, the only firm date they give you is if you didn't respond to the threshold criteria, the 15 days after the second 15 work days, they'll let you know that unfortunately you didn't meet the basic criteria. But other than that, it's February, March.
Okay.
We're going to talk about that later.
Mike, the RFP says first quarter 2023.
Yeah,
That's the only information they provide.
Cool. All right. I'll run with that time frame then. Thanks, guys.
Long time, long wait. Nolan?
Nolan Curtis. I'm a consultant to HMTRI working with Steve and Michael.
Diana. Hey, Diana.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Diana Napier with Workplace in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Great. And hey, Deb.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deb Faracco. I am with Mass Hires Central Region Workforce Board, and I'll be taking over for Bruce Mendelson, running our EPA programs here.
Welcome. I'm sorry to see Bruce leave. He was a great guy, but welcome to the club. And we're here to help. One thing that's different about this group is we share experiences, and that's what makes it work. So if you ever have a question of anyone, just ask. And those who know or have experience will let you know what their experiences are. We do that with landmines and all kinds of things, and stay away from this. And we'll empathize. We've all been where you're at. So
okay, thank you.
Just ask questions.
Appreciate that.
Robin.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Robin Finney-Granston, the Senior Vice President of Programs at SOBRA, which is South Bronx Overall Economic Development Corporation.
Great. Hey, Jake.
Hello again, Mike. Hi, I'm Jake Markowski. I'm also at the Auberly Employment Institute in McKeesport, PA, which is by Pittsburgh, PA.
Great. And Pamela?
Hi, I'm Pam Caruncchio. I'm with the Energy Coordinating Agency in Philadelphia.
Okay, and Dee Aldridge. Dee Aldridge. There we go. Hello. Well, we'll come back to you if we might not be getting your audio. So, okay, and someone from ATEEC. That's our sister organization.
Hi everyone, this is Adriana McBride in Davenport, Iowa. I'm a contractor for
ATEEC. Okay. Well, Adriana works with our sister organization. We have, it's now going to be soon called Earth, and we're much deeper than just HMTRI. We do a lot of environmental education, and future PLCs will talk about that. Ross. Hi, Ross. Hey, Kristen. Could you introduce yourself, Kristen?
Sure. I'm Kristen. I'm in Charleston, West Virginia, and I work for KISRA. That's
great.
In Dunbar, West Virginia.
Great. Hey, Katie.
Hi there, I'm Katie Cameron. I'm with Youth Build Louisville. My sticking point really is figuring out what to put for start and finish dates for the curriculum that we choose. In some cases, I have not yet picked a training provider, so kind of narrowing down those training dates seems a little bit tough.
We'll talk about that then. Okay. Did Dee Aldridge, were you able to get on before? Okay, how about Laura? Hey, Laura.
Good afternoon. I am Laura White from Santa Fe Community College. I'm the grants director actually here, and we are going to be working with our person that's currently doing an EPA grant to write for another one. So I'm trying to learn all I can before we start that process.
Great, great. Janet's one of our favorite people. So I'm sure she's right in the midst of it right now. Michael, where was that?
I think his mic was not working.
Oh, okay.
He put that in the chat.
Okay. Well, how about Max? Max, are you there?
My name is Max Arbogast. I am a intern at KISRA in Dunbar, West Virginia, and I am graduating from West Virginia State University at the end of the month.
Great, great. Well, welcome to Brownfields. Brian.
He also has an audio problem.
Okay,
Mike.
that's fine. Destiny.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Destiny Fields. I am also an intern at KISRA in Dunbar, West Virginia.
Great. Paul.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul DiStefano. I am a training coordinator with the Fortune Society in Long Island City, New York. I'm here representing our Associate Vice President, Samantha Pugh, who's out of the office. And so I'm pretty much here to take notes and absorb.
Okay, great, great. Well, make sure we get you on the, I think they're probably on the PLC list, so they'll get detailed notes of today's session. How about Deborah? Deborah, are you there?
I am. Hi, I'm Deborah Trevorrow from the city of Tacoma in Washington State. It is not raining today, which is very odd for this area. And I work in the city's local employment and apprenticeship training program, like an acronym LEAP, kind of fun. And so we are applying for, I believe it's our 10th grant with EPA, this type of grant, and hope to succeed. Thank you. Thanks
yes, I'm happy to see you applying because they were on and then you took a little bit of break, and welcome back. It's a great program you had. Brian? Hey, Brian.
Brian is
okay, silent.
His mic's not working.
Shelby? Shelby.
Hi, my name's Shelby Harmeyer. I'm also an intern at Kisra with Max and Destiny. I'm graduating at the end of the summer, and we are currently writing our first grant.
All right. That's what we like to see. Elle Fitzwater. Elle Fitzwater. We've got you on mute. We'll come back to you. Erwin? Erwin?
Good afternoon. My name is Erwin Pamami. I work with the Cheyenne Arapaho tribes. I'm the executive director for our Department of Labor here. We have written for the EPA Brownfields grant and was awarded one for I guess the next funding year. And yes, we're actively pursuing the other additional funding for to help foster these types of training and stuff for our Brownfields activities. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Mr. Lipscomb.
William Lipscomb, Bill Lipscomb, Program Manager with Kisra here in Dunbar, West Virginia.
Great. We like to, and some could say, well, takes a lot of time, but we like to put faces to names and get an informal environment going, because really this is all about exchanging information rather than, as much as we try not to, the talking heads, but we try to share from each other. There was someone who called in by phone. Did you want to introduce yourself? Or anyone else?
Good afternoon. Okay. I'm on phone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Ken Alexander, Indianapolis, Indiana, Recycle Force, Director of Training and Operations.
Okay, and I know you may have a question that we were talking about later. We'll get to that. It was about some reimbursements for hotel. We'll talk about that later.
Okay, okay.
April?
Thank you.
Hey, April. Do you want to introduce yourself, April?
Sorry, I was having a little bit of trouble.
That's okay. That's okay. That's the thing about Zoom. You have to do it a couple of times to. It's hard maneuvering around.
You'd think we'd all be used to it by now. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, well, it's morning for me. I am with Zender Environmental here in Alaska with the Rural Alaska Community Environmental Job Training Program. Happy to be here, y'all.
One of our favorite grantees up there in Alaska. They always win the prize when we do face-to-face. They always win the prize with travel the furthest to get to the meeting. So nice to see you, April. Anyone else? Well, let's get started on what we're going to talk about today. The last PLC, we talked about things at that point. You could still change and do research on your PLC, on your grant. Things like developing partnership relationships and doing things that you could include in the grant that took some time. Those of you who go to the notes from last time, or you could go to our website, which is brownfields-toolbox.org, go to PLC Corner and go to the notes, and it's basically a checklist of things that you really should be working on that could super size your grant. Most of those things take a lot of time, but it still isn't too late. So when you have a chance after this call, go to those notes and just check the list off and see if you're doing all of those things. If you're not, there's still time, and you can develop relationships. You can get your advisory committee. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but you could start doing some things. Some of them take several weeks to do, but it's certainly going to help you in the grant competition. So that's what we did last week. This week, we're now getting to the point of grant writing. So we've hopefully done a bunch of research. We've established some partnerships. We've looked at developing advisory committees. We're got a good handle on what our target community is going to look like. We've been talking to people about curriculum. Maybe we've actually brought on some trainers on board. So now it's time to start writing. And we're going to focus today on writing that curriculum and that grant application. And then we're going to talk a little bit about supersizing or supercharging your proposal, things that if you haven't done, maybe you could include them at this date to give you an edge over all the people that aren't attending this PLC. So, well, with that, let's get started with Steve, who's going to give us news from Washington, what's happening. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. And again, good to see everyone. I'm going to just give you a few updates here. One of the things we wanted to share with you was, especially for those of you that are writing your first grant, EPA has prepared some frequently asked questions, and those of you who've prepared grants in the past probably have seen this or know about it, but I wanted to put in the chat a link to those because there's some really good ones, basically some answers to some of the questions you might have. So I'm going to begin by sharing that with you in the chat box. And by the way, this link will also be in the notes that we send out after the call. So check those FAQs, frequently asked questions about the grant submission. Also, one of the things we wanted to share was the information that's been previously provided. Those of you that are just starting to write your grant or maybe unfamiliar with the Connect News newsletter that we do, we've had the last 4 issues have basically been related to grant submission. And I want to give you the link to that also, because these last 4 issues talk about engaging the EPA job training grant recipients and the community, also developing an environmental job training program, and then also developing community environmental job training partnerships and programs, and then lastly, community and labor market assessments. So those last 4 Connect newsletters, I just put the link in the chat box for you to take a look at those. They have some really good information and they might help you with your grant submission. Also wanted to just mention once again, the Brownfields 2022 is in August 16th through 19th in Oklahoma City. How many people, if you have a show of hands, are interested in attending or are planning to attend, I should say? Okay, I see a couple of hands and then there's some that don't have their screens on, but we will be there. We'll have a booth and we're going to be sharing information about your program and all of the programs in this grant project. So one of the things we're doing along those lines is we're asking you to complete the directory scan that we have that gives us information about your program, basically the contact information, your curriculum, etc. That's the kind of information we want to have available to all and any employers that come by the booth to share with your program. Also, if you're coming, be sure to bring some handouts about your program or any marketing you have. This is a chance for you to market it. We're going to have a booth, a table, so we can put out information, flyers, anything, cards about your program. So please bring that along. And again, if you haven't completed the directory scan already, and I see a few of you on here that I know have completed it, so we thank you for doing that. But the others, the link is in the chat box now too. So thanks in advance for helping us with that. Also, for new grantees, if you've signed up for the conference, be sure to take a look at there's some assistance for travel and so on there on the Brownfields 2022 site. So if you've made hotel arrangements or if you haven't yet, be sure to look into that travel assistance because that might be able to help you defer some of the costs of going. And also, as we mentioned last time, I think a lot of us want to make sure we know what the COVID protocols are for the location, the hotel, the conference center and all of that. They now have that online. We have a link to it, in our notes as well. So if you want to kind of stay on top of that. The last I heard, it was, they said everything was low, which means there was going to be kind of a relaxed status on some of the things that they would normally do. So anyway, if you want to kind of stay on top of that, we have a link to that. You can also, it's on a drop-down menu on the main Brownfield site as well. When you click on the About button and you scroll down about 3 or 4 items, you'll see health and safety. So you can also just look it up that way as well. Also, the night before the conference, again, as we mentioned before, the Environmental Justice Caucus is having a meeting from 5 to 6:30 p.m. on Monday night. They have a lot of really good information, and they also, it's open to anyone. You don't even have to be registered for the conference to attend that. And they usually have a really good attendance. So keep that in mind. It's usually a good thing. It's one of the highlights of the conference. Also, we're currently in discussion with EPA about the 2022 annual all grantee meeting. Sessions are being planned for the 12th and 13th. We're also looking at whether or not it's going to be in person or virtual. We're in negotiations right now, or in discussions really with EPA about that. There have been a number of factors that have made us kind of consider whether or not we are going to be able to go virtual or in person. And one of those factors is just hotel availability. It's really scarce right now. So there's some other factors as well. So we will let you know where that is as soon as possible. But wanted to give you a heads up about that because it's planned for October 12th and 13th, and it's going to be a go. It's just a question of whether it will be in person or virtual. So stay tuned for more information on that. Also, there's a couple of places to look. If you're doing an application and you haven't connected with assessment or cleanup grant project folks in your community, you might want to do that as your part of your grant submission. And in the chat box right now, I'm putting a couple of links to places where you can, if you're not sure who those folks are, you might be able to take a look at that information and see, you know, who has the grant or the cleanup grant or assessment grant, and make sure you partner with them, or, you know, you're in contact with them. So any questions on anything we just covered? One of the questions, and I don't know, Ken, are you still on phone? Ken Alexander from Recycle Force? Okay, I don't hear him.
Hello?
Oh, you there, Ken?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you okay now.
Oh, okay. So Ken, we know you asked a question, but we're not sure which conference you were talking about. You had a question about reimbursements or something?
Well, yeah, there's the conference in August the 12th through the August the 16th through the 19th in Oklahoma City. And you got to register for the conference, which is, I got 3 or 4 people that's going to go, and they were concerned about the hotel accommodations. Usually when we go to the conference, the hotel is included, and before we started that process of registering for the Brownfield conference, we wanted to make sure of the hotel. Do we have to book the hotel and then get reimbursed, or is there a set of hotels to set aside for the conference and those that are participating at the conference?
Yeah, usually if at the National Brownfields Conference, if we have a meeting that we host, we usually can provide funding for one night of the hotel. This year, we're not holding any specific event. So we won't be able to reimburse folks for, we're talking about the National Brownfields Conference. We wouldn't be able to reimburse anyone for that. Is that my understanding?
You're talking
Mike?
about
Am
the
I
one
correct in saying that?
that's in August. Yeah, are you talking about the one in August?
Yeah,
August.
in Oklahoma. Yeah, in
Yeah,
Oklahoma City. Yeah, that's the National
Right.
Brownfields Conference.
We'll clarify this for everybody. There's the national conference, Brownfields 22, which is in Oklahoma City, and that's the one in August. We don't have much to do with that conference. It's ICMA and EPA. Last year or a couple of years, we would hold separately our own little version of face-to-face meeting, and that allowed EPA to allow us to pick up a night of hotel for that. We did that once or twice, but we're not going to have that this year. So that really the Brownfields 22 conference in August is everything's on your own, and it is an expensive conference. I mean, it is, but unfortunately, we're not able, for our grant, to do anything on that. What we are able to do is when we hold our all grantee meeting, which is 100% all about job training programs and starting job training programs, EPA allows us to pick up hotel rooms, and then you have to find your own transportation, usually airfare, to get to the conference. We usually do those in Alexandria. We haven't done that because of COVID in a couple of years. We have been planning. This is the October meeting. We've been in the process of planning to see if it's feasible to do something so soon after Brownfields 22, and there's a good chance that may be virtual, and we would actually hold a face-to-face in Alexandria in the springtime. Just to give you a heads up, this is not. It's not in stone yet. We're still talking to EPA, but there was some concern about people having to go to Brownfields 22 and then 2 months later going to our all grantee meeting, and there might be better to do, a virtual meeting in October, which everyone could attend at no cost, and then go face to face in Alexandria in the springtime after the new grantees have been announced. So we're looking at all of this. We've been working on a playing field, but Ken, this is important to you because those hotels are expensive in Oklahoma City. And now, having said everything I just said, there are scholarships. Steve, is that still open to get scholarships for hotel? They were going to close them. They were offering for a while some sort of scholarships.
This is Nolan, Mike. There's two things there. One, there is a block of rooms that EPA has set aside at hotels, and that window is closing very quickly. I'm not sure where they are on their stipends, where they were offering scholarships to assist with defraying costs. So they might need to check with the EPA website or their regional coordinator, but I would do that very quickly because I do know the deadline is closing on the block of rooms that EPA has for Brownfields.
I've been asked. Yeah, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so I want to make sure I understand. So there's a possibility there could be a block of rooms for EPA at the all grantees Brownsfield conference, October the 16th and the 19th, but the window is closing pretty quick.
Well, August. It's the August Brownfields conference.
I'm sorry, I don't know why I said October.
Yeah, the national conference in August. There's a block of rooms that has a rate that EPA has negotiated with the hotel. That's one thing. And then whether there's a stipend or scholarship or assistance with that, you would need to check with EPA because they did have a program that offered some assistance, but I wasn't sure if that was travel or lodging or what that felt in. And if anyone from EPA or regional director is on, they might be able to help us out here and what exactly that is.
So do we know what hotel that is? So if we're booking our trip, we need to know what hotel.
They had several. They had several. So you need to go on the EPA Brownfields website and look at that announcement for the Brownfields conference.
My advice is I would not book anything right now until you figure out if they'll subsidize your hotel, because that is expensive. I don't know. And it could be that you're going to find out that whatever scholarships or subsidies they had are exhausted. So I would hate to have someone do refundable tickets and then find out that, or even sign up for Brownfields and then find out that there's no hotel subsidies. Right now, as far as HMTRI goes, we're not able to do any subsidies for Brownfields in August. Nothing in August. So now I've been asked several questions. How much are they going to be doing on job training in Brownfields? And to be honest, I've been hard pressed to find many sessions. There's not a lot on job training programs. If you want to learn about job training programs, be honest, I don't mean to be pushing the October meeting, the virtual meeting. If we have that, and that would cost nothing, I would definitely sign up for that. That's 2 days of nothing but job training. The August meeting, the national meeting, is all about, the good thing about it is all the vendors, the cleanup people, the insurance people, the banks, the political people that's what you're going to see in August. So that's kind of the difference between these two programs. So if I was concerned about budget, I would, well, again, take it from who you're hearing it from. I would wait till October and go to the October one. It'll cost you almost close to nothing. And if we don't have a face-to-face in October, we'll have it in the springtime. So you could use that budget, in that year.
Okay.
So and on that one, the all grantee meeting, which is an HMTRI event, we will pick up the hotel costs on just that meeting, the October or the spring meeting. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time on this, but I think it's important we clear that for you. I'd hate to have you commit to costs that you find out you can't get reimbursed for. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Mike and Steve, I appreciate that information. I just had Paul to get on so we can both be clear on what's happening in August and what's happening in possibly in October.
Yeah.
Thank you. That makes it very clear for us. So
the October one is
a decision from there.
Yeah, that October is going to be the most cost effective no matter what, and it'll be about job training and setting up job training.
And I would check those travel scholarships, because I think they're still open, but not for long.
Yeah. So Ken, the other thing is I'm reading an EPA announcement, and the hotel group rate ends Monday, July 18th. So if you're looking at hotels, there is a group rate for hotels, but that window closes on Monday, July 18th for the Brownfields hotel group rate. So.
Okay. I'll go on the website and get that information.
Check that out and check on scholarships. I don't know if that's closed already or not. Before we get into this other thing that Nolan's going to head off, is let's answer this other question. And this was a good question about start and stop dates for training. This is a new grantee who does not have on board their trainer yet. One of the things we talked about at the last PLC is there's nothing wrong with you bringing your trainers on board. You need to go out for bid. You go out for bid and get your trainers on board. In other words, you just need a clause in there that says, if you get the funds and if the scheduling works out, what would be the cost of this? And you'd want to ask the question, how long would the training take place? And some of the more experienced grantees can provide some background on this, but you could still line up some trainers, find out how long the training is. It going to be 8-week training, 6 weeks, whatever. Most of our grantees, it depends where you live, they find that if you want to train, the hiring season is spring for summer work. So you want to do your training so that your graduates are graduating at peak employment time. If you bring someone on board and they've been vetted by you, in other words, you got three quotes, and you qualify someone, you could include them in your grant that says XYZ is going to be doing the training or for you, and these are their credentials. As far as the training start and stop dates, maybe we could hear from some of the grantees. If you know the duration of the training, I don't think EPA, they may dock you if you don't put anything down, but if you put a date down and that date changes, I don't think it'll penalize you as far as getting the grant. So if you were going to err, I would err on the side of putting your timeline together, and Nolan's going to talk about that, putting your timeline together. And if you have to revise it later after you get the grant, you can work with your project officer. Is that what some of our more experienced grantees would say?
Sometimes, Mike, we like to say, because we get ourselves in a pinch if we say a month and a year, because you don't know what the timing is. So kind of like quarter one, year one, quarter one, that kind of thing. So it's simplified and also flexible. Is that okay with this one?
Yes, that's good.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah, you want to have a number. You want to, so numbers are good, generalities are bad. So the more you could get specifics, they like. You keep that as a mantra: numbers, not generalities. And if you need to revise things later or they slide one way or another, you could work with your regional coordinator to do that. That way it'll keep from getting, you don't want to get dinged. I'd say, well, you weren't specific on your training. That's what I'm trying to say. Any other comments? Yes.
Mike, there were two questions in there basically related to the October meeting, wondering if there's a link to the October meeting. And that was from Larissa and Katie. And there is no link yet. There should be one coming soon. As we mentioned to begin the program, we're still in the process of trying to determine if it's going to be face-to-face or virtual. We're having some issues, particularly, hotel issues and availability, as well as a number of other factors. So, but that decision should be pretty final, I would think, fairly soon.
Perhaps before the notes go out.
I do want to emphasize that we are currently in discussions of that with EPA. So it's not going to be a unilateral decision on our part. We're doing it in conjunction with EPA to determine what's going to be best for you, the grantees. So at this point, we don't want to get ahead of them or out in front of our own headlights. So we had an idea of what we want to do. We're now discussing and trying to nail it down as to what's the best way to go about that. So we'll just have to ask you to stay tuned and be patient.
Yeah. The topics will be fairly similar between the two. One it'll just be the virtual. Those of you who have attended all grantee meetings in the past, we're going to have after hours, we're going to have videos, we're going to talk about concerns of grantees and do a whole lot of networking, and we'll have EPA people. That's part of the key thing. We want to make sure that we have the people we need to have. We need to have the attorney from EPA, the retired attorney. We need to make sure Dave is there and Channing is there and all your regional coordinators are there. So unless we could put on a good show, we don't want to have some haphazard event that you spend a lot of time and effort and some budget to go to and not get value out of it. So, but that should be coming in the next week. So what we're going to do there. Okay, well, Nolan's going to we're going to focus on writing this grant, and Nolan's going to talk about a few things in terms of some landmines. I'm going to talk about some no-nos, and then I want to wind up with some things you could do to supercharge your grant at this point. So Nolan, do you want to take over?
Sure, thank you. And again, thank you all. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever your time frame is. I'm not going to pain you to read all the slides. Steve, if I could ask you to go back one right there. Okay, we'll start here. And again, these are things that are sometimes just, blinding flashes of the obvious, but you should have a firm timeline for developing this grant. There's too many moving parts and there's too many things that have to be done in a short time. So you need to get a timeline. You should have gone through the RFA, picked out all of those requirements and components, and put together a timeline of what by when. Who is preparing that? When are they going to have a draft? When are you going to go over it and have a final? When is that going to be pieced together? When is the whole thing going to be reviewed, et cetera? So you need to follow your timeline. And if you don't have a timeline, just go make one, because otherwise you're going to get lost in the process and you will run out of time. The application should be consistent and continuous in its reading, and even though it's a quilt of different parts, it should all hang together. So we recommend that usually a single individual is responsible for writing the final proposal. Now, whether that's just transitions between all the different sections or gathering all the pieces and then sitting down and writing it, we found that single authorship hand and voice seems to work well. You should send the drafts of the proposal to all of your advisors and key partners for review. Often we have so many things in our head and so many things we're thinking about, those don't always get communicated onto the page. And so you want to make sure that things are accurate. You want to make things that are included. What about that? Things that might have gotten dropped because there are very strict guidelines on length. And so it's easy to lose things in that compression. So you want your partners to review this, and you again want to take credit for everything you do. So a byline of this has all been reviewed by the active partners or participants or something gives you credit for all this work that you're doing. A big one is your numbers must add up. So the people who are charged with the budget reviews, the costs, the projected expenditures, they need to be on point. You need to double check that the numbers across the narrative are consistent and they make sense and they add up. And so it's got to not only be accurate, but it also has to pass the SNP test, in terms of dollars and hours and those kinds of levels and efforts. So the numbers do matter. As Mike had mentioned, avoid generalizations, be as quantitative as possible. So it doesn't mean you have to commit yourself to death, but you do want to find some way to bracket it in so that an outside or third-party observer knows what you're talking about in terms of student outputs or dates or times or dollars. You want to maintain consistency, obviously, throughout the proposal, and you do not want to exceed the page counts. I have not reviewed grants for EPA, but I have for other federal agencies, and we stop at the page count. So you might have great things 2 pages later, but if we say 5 pages, we're not going to read 6 and 7. So do not exceed the page count, and submit your application early. And this allows for, sometimes things come up along the way. Sometimes there might be comments back from your regional administrator. So you want to make sure that application is finished early, reviewed often, checked off, and then submitted. Next slide, please. Sure. There is help, so never give up, never surrender. You're not alone. So there's a grants government help desk for assist, and these other sites to get support, as well as our own websites at HMTRI. These will be in your notes, so you don't have to scramble furiously. We'll give these websites to you. On the application submission, you need to verify that your grant submission process is up to date. And so you have to be set up to submit the grant proposal using grants.gov and SAM. And the EPA considers that the party submitting the application package is the applicant. So you can't submit for another organization, and another organization can't submit for you. It has to be your application. And you can check your account status by going to sam.gov. And you should have a UEI or unique identifier number, and that needs to be updated, and you need to review it before you go to all the trouble of submitting your grant. Next slide, please. And so you can find your UEI number. Again, that's a very long URL. So, you know, we'll have it in the notes, and but you can see if it's there. You need to have your eBiz point of contact identified, and they can submit or authorize an individual as the AOR, or authorized organization representative. So at some point, this all rolls up to a single point of contact, and that's that you know, AOR. If you're submitting an application on behalf of the organization, you must be the AOR, or you have to use the AOR's username and password in order to access the account and the grant. You must use your account at least once per year for your account to remain active. So many of you have done this before, but your account may have gone inactive. So you need to go back and check and make sure it's active. And you can check the status of an entity registration, and you can make sure your password is up to date. So it's really important, if you've been there, done that, that you make sure that all of your information is current. Otherwise, you're going to be an unhappy camper. But last thing is, I can just tell you, never give up, never surrender, keep going. Yes, sir. Yes, Steve.
Nolan, you have a question here from Pam.
Okay.
Yeah. No, Nolan, I don't understand the POC. Should we just have our chief executive be the organized representative? I'm asking because on another government grant we submitted and didn't get, it was an issue we didn't really understand. We thought they wanted a project manager contact, and one of the things we got dinged on was we had two different contacts.
Right. So whoever this person is, whatever the rank and hat size is, it needs to be one person. It ultimately rolls up as that AOR.
Well, let me interrupt here a little bit. The eBiz point of contact is probably your CFO, the head of your organization. Now, they have the authority to authorize an AOR, an authorized organization representative, and that AOR can submit the grant. Now, the eBiz POC could also submit the grant. In other words, you could either the point of contact is basically the chancellor or the head of your organization. They have the authority to delegate the actual submission of the grant to the authorized organization representative. So in other words, if you write a grant, now I'm not sure what happened in your other grant. If you write a grant and you submit it, you're not on their list and you're not authorized, so you're going to get dinged for that.
So how does our CEO designate the AOR?
That is on SAM, so they can do that. In other words, so it's very important you go back to SAM's for a whole lot of reasons. One, and this we talk about in these critical issues that could ding your proposal. The government changes passwords. They change the way things operate from year to year. So you want to do a dry run, and now is a good time to do that. Do a dry run and go into SAM's and go through this exercise as if you're going to submit. If they say, what's your password, and you put your old one in and it doesn't work, you've got to update your password. Go back. If you have any problems, go to the help desk. That's number one, is go to that help desk. Once the the submission process is different than the actual evaluation process. In other words, when you write the grant for EPA, they're going to evaluate it, but the process of getting that grant to EPA is going through SAM, going through grants.gov. And so you've got a two-step thing. You got to get your grant to where it's supposed to go on time, to the right person and the right designations. And then you've got to have the grant, once they receive the grant. So my suggestion is, when in doubt, call that help desk. And it's the same for every grant that in the government. So they should be able to.
It gets a little bit different. Sorry, this is Michael from LA Conservation Corps.
Yeah, Michael.
I was just hoping I could give the quick and dirty. Your EBIZ point of contact should be the person that manages your SAM account. Your AOR should be the person who has the grants.gov login and actually handles submitting the application. It doesn't matter what your organizational structure is. It doesn't matter who's signing the application as the chief executive. Just make it the person who's going to deal with that account, because otherwise you're asking other people, hey, I logged in. Could you send me the whatever information? It's just a big mess. My experience with the EPA applications has been, it doesn't matter so much who signs, who's the AOR, who's the EBIZ contact. It's not like Youth Build. Youth Build will come after you and say, oh, your AOR is not the person who signed the letter, and blah, blah, and you end up having to do all that negotiation during the grant agreement period and changing accounts and blah, blah, blah. But EPA has been easier. So just make it the people who are administering the accounts and get the emails for those accounts, because then you won't have any problems with your workflow.
Okay, so Michael, on your grant, and you've done this several times, who is your EBIZ and who is your AOR?
The EBIZ point of contact is our compliance officer, who is the person who manages the SAM registration. And then I, as grant writer, am the AOR because I have the grants.gov account and I actually submit and deal with the standard forms, etc. Our deputy director signs the SF424, and that has never been an issue.
Okay, so let's project this to Pam, just as an example. Say Pam she's got this dynamite grant and she wants to submit it. Who is her EBIZ and who is her AOR?
So mine would be then the EBIZ, like Michael said, if I'm understanding, is our CEO. And then we just have to make sure that the AOR that we've done on SAM entered that AOR.
Correct.
And that has come from our CEO.
Yeah, and that
alphabet soup.
And let's say that's you, and right. So, or whoever is going to submit the grant.
Right. But I really like Michael's idea about the compliance person, and that's helpful to visualize. One of our things was we wanted the communication. We didn't want to have all this going into our CEO, who already is beset from all sides, but that makes it clear, and I really appreciate the dialogue.
So the person that's working with SAMs is the EBIZ.
Yes.
And that EBIZ person, and they're going to have his contact information and all that to tell them they got accepted or whatever. And then they got the AOR with their contact information, which would be whoever is submitting the grant. Is that correct, Michael?
Yeah, I would say it that way. Again, EBIZ, SAM, AOR, grants.gov.
Good. Okay, it's really
Thank you, Michael.
That is
very helpful.
That is really important. And I like the idea of why get the chancellor or the CEO with all this stuff, and they may change jobs or something, and then it's a mess, right? Okay.
And you said there were two questions, Mike? Mike Senu, you said there were two questions in the.
Oh, Steve, was there another question in chat? Steve? Oh, is there another question in the chat?
Hold on, Mike, I was muted. Let's see. I can't.
Okay, well, that was one of the things I was going to cover on landmines, because that is a major landmine, is getting that grant to the people that have to do it. And many of the comments that regional coordinators gave us over the years have been they borrowed someone else's, they had people who are not registered. It's a very set, distinct approach here, and hopefully everyone on the call understands that. Again, if you have questions, as we've just done, be very specific with the help desk and you know, go with that. But Michael has been very successful for several years using this process, and I like his ideas that he presented.
Mike, I can't access the chat while I've got my screen up on screen share.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
let me see.
I don't know if there's another question or not.
And I'm done with the slides, Steve, so you can get the slides.
Okay, so, all right. So now I can go to the chat.
Okay. So let's get on. So we covered this whole issue with the wrong UEI, which could be a problem. You've got to make sure you have the right UEI. You've got the right IOR. You've got the right EBIS. So that'll get you, that gets your grant to EPA for evaluation. Now, let's talk a little bit about what happens when it gets there. And they make comments that sometimes are general, but one of the big ones is the grant writing was difficult to understand. They did not, and again, we've got in this room people who have been very successful at grant writing, and please add or correct anything I say here. They indicated that because they did not respond in sequence, the grant evaluation became kind of difficult and hard to understand. Now, you can't assume that someone's going to read through the whole grant. So each section has to stand by its own. But again, you want this to flow like a novel, and you want to go right through that RFA, and you want to make sure, number one, you answer every question, every sub-question. New grantees, the biggest ding on these things is when they assume something, or I've said something, I've responded to this somewhere else, I don't need to repeat it. They get points off, and then it comes back on the reader notes. You failed to answer this sub-question. So dissect that, and don't ever not respond to something that's in that RFA. Always put something down. As we were talking about, if there's a timeline or when you're going to be holding classes, put something down. You could argue about the details later, but make sure you definitely answer every question. Many of the criticisms about applications where they went too high on fringes, or they had high mileage costs and they didn't justify why they had mileage costs, or they had high personnel costs, or personnel costs they didn't explain what they were for. And often some grantees did not explain sufficiently what is covered by EPA and what's not. And you've got a leveraging section where you have a chance to talk about what's being leveraged and being paid by other people, but don't make it very clear what EPA is paying for. And because the thing that'll ding it is, well, we don't cover that. You know, why? In other words, you're asking, is this in the grant? Is this going to cost us money? You know, so they're very concerned over what are we as EPA, or what is EPA paying for? And is that explained very clearly in the grant? And Nolan hit the nail on the head with budget numbers. That came over again and again. I think there are evaluators who they say, okay, let's get the calculators out and let's check their budget numbers. They're going to go from threshold to narrative to tables, and do these numbers add up? And often they don't. And that's easy to happen when you've got multiple people writing these grants. And that gets back to the other thing that Nolan said. It really helps to have one person write the final grant. I know that's a pain, but he's collecting information, asking for information, but he's going to write. And if one person writes it, you're more likely to have numbers that aren't going to contradict each other. So it's just that you take that time and start writing those numbers. Now, here's another problem people get into. You change something and you forget to change it somewhere else. And so you end up with a grant application with numbers that don't match, and an instant ding right off the bat. So budget is critically important. The other thing about it, and Nolan also touched base, give yourself lots and lots of time before submission, because you don't know what you might run into, or something's down. Have your grant completed well in advance. And ideally, EPA would like to see you pass that around. And I'm going to talk a little bit about things that you can do to supersize your grant that other people might not be doing. EPA would like to see you pass your grant application to some of your, at least your advisory committee and maybe your key partners. I'm not necessarily talking about spelling or correctness. I'm talking about qualitative, what you're planning on doing. And it doesn't take much to do it. Even if your grant isn't completely ready to submit, pass some drafts around. In fact, if you got something going now, pass it on to someone in your advisory committee. This gets back to advisory committee. You should have an advisory committee, even if this is your first year grant. What savvy grant submitters do is they'll recruit an advisory committee and say, we're applying for this grant. We would like to have you on the advisory committee. This might entail 1 or 2 or whatever number of meetings you might have. We'd like you to participate in a program if we get the grant, and if we don't, we're planning on resubmitting at a future date. Get that list together and include it in the grant. In other words, if I have in my grant application my advisory committee and you don't, who's going to get more points? So the same thing goes with whether you have trainers on board, whether you have partners on board. Now, and this brings on a very important point, employers. Just as saying you've got advisory committee on board, have some potential employers on board. In other words, we're applying for this grant. We're anticipating they're going to have HAZWOPER and confined space and lead. And would you be interested in working with our program? Would you consider looking at some of our graduates? Yes, yes, yes. Could you write us an email or a letter that says you really think there's a good idea for the community and you'd be happy to look at your graduates? You need to put this in your attachments. They don't want attachments of people that say, oh yeah, we support the program. No, we support the program and we're going to look at their graduates. We really like them. We like what they're doing. Or we support their program and we're going to provide free lunches, or we're going to provide transportation. We're doing financial literacy for them and we're donating in kind. So those attachments and those letters of support have, like everything in this program, be very specific. There's still time to do all this. So you really want to lock in some commitments. Now, we're not saying I'm going to hold you to this. You know, you got to hire our graduates no matter what. Nobody knows what their labor demands are going to be a year from now, but you want them to consider you. So whatever you do, and Nolan made a reference to this, if it's not in the application written, it doesn't exist. Now that seems kind of goofy, but it's true. People evaluating your program don't know your program at all. All they know about your program is what they're reading. So if you're going to do some great things and you don't include it in your narrative, you may as well not be doing it. I mean, that's pretty harsh, but you have got to take credit and include, whether it's even a half a sentence or a sentence. Oh yes, and we're using our advisors to improve our grant application, and we're passing the we're looking forward to our advisors, even though this is a new program. We've got our advisory board on hand. Write it into the grant. It's going to push you way ahead of everyone else. The one thing that not many people do that will, again, supercharge your proposal, and I've mentioned this before, have some sort of public meeting. If you have a ward elected representative, that's the best. If you could do that, have them announce your intentions on submitting an EPA grant for job training in the community. Just a simple announcement at a city council meeting. Or if you can't do that, or that's a little bit out of your wheelhouse, go to a church, go to a community meeting, and announce that, oh, by the way, such and such organization is submitting a grant to EPA that wouldn't take effect till next year, but it could bring some benefits to the community in terms of training local people. And if you're going to do it, make sure you write it in the grant. Again, if you don't write it in the grant, they're not going to see it. If you write it in the grant, you're going to get pushed ahead. It'll be a definite benefit for you.
Mike,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a question in the chat from Katie. The question is there a number of letters of support we should aim for?
I don't know that it's more quality than quantity. You want, 3, 5, you've got page limits, and that was a question, I guess, of you've only got what, 15 pages, you've got 12 pages, and then 15 and 3 pages. So I don't know. Do any of the grantees feel comfortable with a number that they use?
Here's Michael in the chat. And Michael, I don't know if you're still on, if you want to clarify. See there? He basically said for us, we were aiming for at least 4, one to cover each of the partnership categories in the RFP: environmental, job training, community, and employers. And his mic is not working, so I'm just relaying that for him. So he's looking at 4, and he covers those 4 categories.
So he covered every phase of his operation: training, employment,
right.
Community.
We had 9 that we submitted last year, and so far between Jake, my CEO, and myself, we've sent out like 18 requests, in hopes that a decent chunk of those come back in time.
Yeah.
And again, hitting all 4 of those categories.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. And that still gave you time to put your other attachments in and whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I always make it so that way the letters are the last thing I'm waiting on. Right. Everything else is done and ready to go in.
Right. What, from the more experienced grantees on this call, at this phase in your grant writing, what do you find? Where do you find yourself in hot water, or what are things that you think you can still recover from, and you're a little stressed out about? Are there particular things that you're concerned about at this point? Hey,
there's a site that it would be like perfect in Philadelphia for our grant.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a cleanup site. And it's taken a while to get the right connection to them as a possible employer, but we just got it and we're going to be talking to them. But we have other employer connections too, but that was the one we wanted.
Yeah.
So we're just like hoping.
Yeah.
And I want to give credit, Gianna Rosati, who's our regional rep, our rep, the Mid-Atlantic coordinator, made the connection for us. I really appreciate it.
That's great. And regional coordinators are really important. I'm going to bring something up that some grantees asked, and I said I'd try to find an answer to. And it was a question of, the timing, the 5 years, 500,000. Could you do 4 years and 500,000? Could you do shorter periods or whatever? I did write Channing. I requested the specific questions. I didn't get anything in writing back. And I would say that if you don't do the 5 year, 500,000, definitely talk to your regional coordinator and get a clarification on that. This is something that we don't want to make a mistake on this. In other words, if you're going to spend 3 man-months writing this thing, if you're going to do something different than 5 years and 500,000, talk to the regional coordinator and get a specific answer, maybe even in writing if you can. I think Nolan had a good response to that. Nolan, your feelings working with DOE and project officers in government agencies.
Yeah, they write the proposals a certain way for a reason, and that's kind of their desired state. But if you can be creative, but like I said, you need to find out where those guardrails are, and so sometimes they won't be as specific. So you have to read carefully because it says up to 5 years, up to $500,000 or something like that in the RFA. So, you have to look at that language, but say, oh, we got this great idea for a program. We need 500K, but it's only 3 years. That's not a no, don't do that. But you're really looking at, stretching their envelope. So, anything outside of that, I would stay close with the regional administrator. And I'd sometimes ask if there's a direct answer. Is this going to be considered less of a proposal or get me points off, or is this all fair game? And but that's the best we can do. We don't want to advise you to do something then have you not get a grant because you did something wacky that HMTRI said, oh, you can go do this, and stuff. So we're trying to give technical support, but some of this has to be answered by EPA. And so if there's again a regional coordinator or somebody on who can shine some light on that issue, that would be great.
They may have talked about this, and I'm sure that the evaluators are going to have to talk about that because they may or may not get applications one way or another. We don't know. Definitely finish that grant early, pass it around, take credit. This is not a time to be timid. Boast everything you do, because this is your time to shine. If they know about your program, they actually have to recuse themselves from evaluating your proposal. So definitely, describe everything very carefully. Any other tips at this point in proposal writing where we could help someone that may be new or is resubmitting a grant? I would say one last thing for those of you who said, oh man, I've been to these PLCs and we're going to wait till next year. This is too much at this point in time. My advice to you is submit something. It may not be the Rolls Royce or the Cadillac or the perfect grant, but this is what it's going to do for you. You may get it. You may be a special exception, and everyone should this is one thing we've talked about in the past. Everyone should have special factors. There may be a geographical distribution where they desperately want to have a grant in your region and they don't and haven't had one. Submit no matter what. And if you don't get the grant, there's lots of benefits that come your way. You get to sit down with your regional coordinator and go over weak spots. And as Gennady, they will put you under their wing and coach you along. You'll be put on all the lists for technical assistance for next year or for the next round. So there's a whole lot of, you will not be in the same position in the next round if you submit something and get shot down this round. So submit something, and it does take time, but submit and get onto the bandwagon no matter what. And so for those who are hesitant, I would say submit and and go for it and see where it takes you. We have to keep in mind that we're on some new territory this year. They've got 3 times the money. They've got new sets of parameters. We've got some new people in EPA. So a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts right now.
It'll also help you learn about your own organizational capacity and where you might need to shore up some of your practices or business, or so if your real weakness is you just don't have the labor market surveys, or your real weakness is you just haven't formed a coherent board, or your real weakness are you haven't developed the relationships with employers, it gives you a very good indicator of what it is you need to work on to strengthen your program. So I like, again, never give up, never surrender. Doing the whole Galaxy Quest thing.
We've had grantees who got shut down, but they got local money. And so all of a sudden, they did go to City Hall. They were shopping around, and they said, well, we could find some money for you. We'll give you some planning money, or we might even give you some pilot money to set up a program similar to this, but maybe different. So there's a lot of benefits that may come without getting funded. Robin, as per funding is 500. What, Steve? What was that?
It says as per funding, is it 500,000 per year or 500,000 over the 5 years?
Over 5, unfortunately. Yeah, that makes a big difference. 500 over 5. Now, what EPA will say is that a huge part of this project, and they are right, is leveraging. We have grantees who, they used to be 200,000 over 3 years. And these programs are $5 and $6 million programs. And you say, well, what do you mean? They got this as a starter grant. It was a federal grant. They started doing training, and then all of a sudden they found all this other money coming their way. They saw there's a whole lot of other, and sometimes they're much bigger programs. And they said, you've got the capacity, you've got the institution, you've got the people to run it. We want to fund you. Would you consider doing this other program? And sometimes those programs are really close to what they're doing in job training, and sometimes they're ancillary and they might be synergistic to this program. So there have been many examples of leveraging. The EPA really intended this to be a starter program, and with that's highly levered. And their contention is that many of the services of this program are already in communities and they're available. And part of their mission is to provide these services. And we want our grantees to not duplicate those services, but to leverage them. So that's that. Is there expectation of how many people enroll in training versus graduate and placement? Well, they've got a standard in there of 70% placement. We've got grantees that are doing 100% placement. And once, I would say, and some of the grantees could correct me on this, I think generally they might recruit 20 and they might get some dropouts, and they've got 15 graduates and they're going to place most of all their graduates. So it's placement is a big component of this program, and it's not we'll train them and they'll go find a job. You really have to have it built into your grant, and again, if you don't, it's going to cost you points, evaluation points. You really have to follow it. I would say many of our programs are 100% placement. Now, they may not always be specifically in a brownfield or Superfund site, but they say that they're 100% placement.
Yeah, I'd also say it depends on, again, your population and your zip code and your circumstance and all that. So you have to be realistic, and so there's some populations where you're not going to get 100% graduation rates or retention rates. You're not going to get 100% employment. But the idea is that you don't want to take a woman or a man and have them spend their time and get their hopes up if there's nothing at the end of that process. And so it's real important that the process connect to something that is tangible and real, and they make it through, and you help them make it through, they can get there. So what we've seen in the past are when we've had training or job development programs that never connected to anything in the real world. That's where you get the disappointment, and that's where you get a bad outcome.
Yeah, I would tend to be optimistic rather than pessimistic. You'd have to go over 70, you might go 80, 90. And if you're going to say 100%, you may want to say why, because you're going to be doing 100% tracking, or you've got employers that you feel that you can place your graduation class. It's not a large class, and you're going to be working with them one-on-one. So I think while you don't want to, if you say 100%, you may want to justify it, but I would not go too low on that and knock yourself out being pessimistic about it. You would be surprised that I think you'll find that with the credentials, they've got $5,000 worth of credentials, and they've got some skills and certifications that you can't get easily, that they can find pretty good jobs. Page 4 on the RFP, referring to commercial driver's license. Okay, can you provide explanation? Okay, audio is not working. Here's the situation. If you're going to do commercial driver's license, they've loosened things up. It's got to be hazmat oriented. And that also goes for forklift training. If you're going to do forklift training, material handling, driver's license, you have to attach for transporting hazardous materials. If you don't, you're in a Department of Labor program. You're different. So definitely link it. In fact, to the extent that any program that doesn't have to do with hazardous materials, you want to link it somehow. Always link to some connection to brownfields or hazardous materials. But again, this is where the money is coming from. If it's not in that smokestack, they really can't fund it. It's a Department of Labor program. So always go there. And that also is important on forklift handling. A lot of them, well, I do forklift handling, but
Mike?
Yes.
Yeah. Mike, on my end, you're dropping out a lot. If you could just kind of repeat the last minute of what you said. I don't know if anybody else is having the same audio problem.
Okay. Always link it to hazardous materials or brownfields or Superfund, whether it's forklift, material handling. Another area that comes in, you might have a flagger who's working on the highway. and he's directing traffic. He's not a traffic handler. He is directing traffic at a hazardous materials site. So always qualify and that bring home everything to hazardous materials. That's plus rather than minus. You know, again, knowing where your money's coming from is really important. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we'll get you some answers on the October meeting soon, and we'll have a lot of these. Everything we talked about today will be in the notes that you'll get on Friday. And hope you all have a couple of good weeks and happy writing. This is exciting. I can't say that I envy you. I've done my share of grant writing and it's no fun, I know that, but definitely get your feet wet and get into it. It's actually kind of fun once you get into it, because if you're writing a grant, you visualize. That's the thing about this grant. You visualize like going down a toboggan slide. You're going around the curves, you see, and when you've written that grant and you've finished, you know exactly that you can do this and you know how you're going to do it. And it really gives you a pretty good feeling when you're through that. So
Mike,
yes.
you have Erwin raised his hand. Erwin, you're on.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes, good afternoon. I had a question related to the on the solicitation where it talks about the eligibility use for grant funds and the specific types of training that they propose to deliver for their training descriptions. There's a whole menu of these here, and I see lots of different options for some sort of like, I mean, I'm not saying they're not related, they are, but you know, how many of these can you pick from? I mean,
well, you definitely don't want to veer far from that list.
Yeah.
Now that's number one. If you're going to go, you're going to go off in some different direction. And where that list come from, the people who fund this are Offices of Solid Waste and Emergency Response. So in other words, the money flows from Congress through, in this case, it's going to be the infrastructure fund, but they're adhering to the laws of OSWR, which is in charge of all of those things on that list. So you want to stick close to the list, and if you veer from it, you want to link it to your labor market assessment. If you're, in other words, everyone's got to do HAZWOPER. Lead and asbestos depends if you're in an urban area. If you're in a place where there's no lead or asbestos, you don't need that. Confined space, often if you're going to do lead removal, you're going to be in confined spaces. First aid, OSHA 10 or 30. You're not supposed to do construction, but these are courses that have to do with safety. So those are go-to. After that, there's things that bio-waste and other things that may be considered hazardous materials. Why some of those are off the beaten path is they have to do with hazardous materials. But it really comes down to what your employers want.
Yes, that's what I was getting towards, was that, we may have like two different types of employers. Is it permissible that if they already have employees that are working there and they do commit to hiring some of ours, is it allowable for us to include those employees in our training activities, or is it?
If they're underemployed, and if they said, I've got some guys that are they're moving bags around of dirt, but if they had hazmat or if they had lead, I could hire them as a lead remediator.
Okay, very good. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And yeah, we're not going to veer off from the list. There's just so many options here. It's just like, wow, let's do them all.
Now, don't start telling people you're going to do incumbent training, because that's a little different. Now you're teaching a guy to be a programmer or something. These are underserved, underutilized underserved people, unemployed people. But if you could move a guy up from sweeping the floor to a lead remover and triple his salary, that's a good deal, you know. Yeah.
Yes, very good. Stackable credentials are always the good way to go. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anything else? Well, I really thank everyone for their patience. You know, when we started this, it was a half-hour call. It's hard to believe now, but this is important time. And as I said, we learned from each other. And thanks for the contributions everyone's made. I think the most valuable information is people who have been through it. And if you have any questions, just respond to the notes and we'll try to get you answers. We'll be meeting again in 2 weeks, but you're in the soft spot of this thing right now. So good luck, all of you.
Thank you.
And, no more questions. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank
All
you.
right.
All right. Keep
See
your
everyone.
chins up.
Thanks. Yep. Keep positive.
Nolan, did you get my my estimate on that?
Yes. Yes, I
Okay.
did. Thanks. So yeah, like I said, I gotta talk to these people, but I had some other work
Yeah.
done for them, and they're very good, but they're not
Not cheap.
necessarily the government cheese part of the program. You know?
Yeah. Well,
I'll just see what it is.
There's
Yeah.
tremendous advantages.
It is what it is.
There's some tremendous advantages if you could work directly with them, mostly if there's issues that pop up,
So,
you know.
Yeah, so I'll see what it is, and we can
Yeah.
talk about the pros and cons and cost
Mike,
effectiveness.
I learned one thing today, and that is I can't check out the chat messages if I'm sharing my screen.
Oh,
okay.
I was
So-
like, where's that button at? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's not there as
Okay.
long as I'm sharing a screen.
Well, at our next 3-person call, you'll have to give me the tutorial, or just, you know,
Oh.
but as long as if I'm zooming from my iPad, it's more limited, but so I might have to just get a camera for my regular computer because it seems to have more menu options on the regular computer than on the iPad version.
And I don't mind doing it. I didn't know that. I went searching for, okay, where do I find my chat button? It's like, oh, I can't find it, right? Because I'm on share screen.
Yeah.
Adriana, are you learning some things? Are you there? Maybe she's got us on, but not really on.
Yeah.
Maybe she's got some other things, multitasking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She asked if she could come to one of the PLCs. I said, sure. Oh, you've got to turn the recording off.
Okay, let's see. How do I do that? You know what? That's a good thing that you